Gus threw on his backpack and took a last glance at himself in the mirror before he heard his mom call for him, telling him he was going to be late for his first day of school. He gave a last huff of breath, told his mom goodbye, and then headed out. As he reached the corner of the block, he almost half expected to see Austin waiting for him so they could walk to school together like they always had for the last 4 years. But of course he wasn't there. Gus and Austin had broken contact with each other halfway through summer break. Today was going to be the first time in over a month that they were going to have to see each other face to face, something that Gus was not looking forward to very much. The idea of suddenly being forced to study in the same classes and eat lunch in the same room with someone he's been actively avoiding sounded very, very, very awkward, and he wasn't the type to take well to awkward situations. The two had met in 6th grade. Back then, Gus had just gotten into middle school, but due to where he lived, had to go to a different junior high than all of his friends from elementary school. He was alone, and he felt awkward. Very awkward. The worst times were during things like lunch or gym, when it seemed like everyone was rubbing his loneliness in his face as they went about the hours laughing with their friends and hardly acknowledging Gus's existence. Being a not very socially adept person, whenever Gus made friends in the past, it was usually the other person who initiated it. That, or they were just thrown together by some outside force, such as being partnered for a school project, or their parents knew each other and arranged for them to meet. But it seemed middle school was a whole new ballgame. Kids stuck with their groups of friends like glue, and really didn't bother to veer out to talk to others, unless of course it was for a less than pleasant encounter. But it seemed even bullies didn't want to bother with Gus, and this avoidance made Gus constantly wonder what was wrong with him. After all, if other people didn't like him, then there must be something wrong with him. It must be his fault. This thinking ate away at him for months, constantly questioning everything he did and everything about himself. What little self-confidence he had dropped to a new low, until just the thought of going to school felt like a huge weight in his gut. He felt unbearably lonely, and yet also unworthy of people's friendship, and he wished for nothing more than for someone to come up to him, someone to say hi to him, someone to just take away that huge weight. And one day, during another lonely lunchtime, that wish came true. Gus rounded another corner and up ahead in the distance saw his high school. Not 2 seconds later, a school bus rushed past him. As he looked at the bus, he noticed a familiar face look back at him from the back window. It was a girl he met during the 2 weeks of daytime summer camp he went to earlier in the year. Excited to see her, Gus smiled and waved, and she returned the gesture. As he watched the bus go up to the school and drive in, it took Gus a second to realize just how easy and thoughtless it was to wave to someone. And then he had to scoff and shake his head as he realized just how normal that's supposed to be. But that wasn't normal for Gus, at least not until recently. Waving to someone he didn't know very well would have been out of the question back in 6th grade, which is why when Austin had come up to him that day during lunch and asked if he wanted to be friends, Gus felt so surprised and so happy. He didn't question why Austin wanted to be friends, or really question anything about Austin at all. All he knew was there was this person who came along and took away that unbearable loneliness. And he sure as heck wasn't going to question that. Gus and Austin would spend a lot of time together. From studying, to sports, to parties, to just hanging out. They soon became practically inseparable best friends. They had inside jokes and knew practically everything about each other. And it made Gus feel so fortunate to have a friend like Austin. So much so that he would never really blink an eye when he sometimes found out that Austin would lie about things. They were small things at first, just things that any 6th grader may feel compelled to lie about if it meant scoring more cool points. But as the grades went by, Austin's lies became more and more common. Or perhaps it was just that as Gus grew to know Austin more, it became easier for him to know when his friend wasn't being totally truthful. Either way, Gus didn't bring it up. Austin was his friend, and if his friend felt the need to do something like that, then Gus would accept him. After all, Austin had accepted Gus when no one else would, even if he did often tease him around a bit for his clothes or hair or interests, but that was just friendly teasing. It was harmless. Shrugging off the things Austin did just became a part of being his friend, which for the most part was okay, but it was the things that involved Gus having to do these things with Austin that would make Gus feel pretty uncomfortable. Things like lying to his parents about where he had been because Austin wanted to go somewhere they weren't allowed to. Or even small things like feeling the need to agree whenever Austin carelessly made fun of something or someone, so as not to cause friction. But even though it made Gus feel uncomfortable, that didn't stop him from continuously going along with whatever Austin did. He was his best friend after all, he needed to be there, and it always made Gus feel so guilty whenever he wasn't able to. As a matter of fact, feeling either guilty or stupid seemed to be a pretty normal occurrence when it came to being around Austin. After a while, it really started bugging Gus. He'd always try to shove it away as an annoyance, but as time went on, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He spent so much time with Austin, and yet it seemed every minute he was with him was exhausting. And no matter how much Gus changed, conformed, and did everything in hopes that he would stop feeling that way, it never did. If anything, it just got worse and worse as time went on. And yet, at the same time, Gus felt like he couldn't really do anything about it. Anytime he tried mentioning something related to Austin doing something wrong, Austin had a way of turning the conversation around, and, without directly saying it, basically always got the same message across. Austin was all Gus had. Before he came along, he had nothing. Austin was there for him, and therefore Gus was just being selfish. And that was exactly the feeling Gus had, sitting right next to that exhaustion. And so despite all the negative impacts of their friendship, Gus hung on to it, forgiving the things Austin did, and letting him basically act as though he was in command of Gus. It wasn't until earlier in the year, when Gus and Austin went to summer camp for those 2 weeks, that Gus had something of a revelation, and it happened on a day when Austin was absent. It was during free time, and Gus was taking advantage of the time by practicing some programming on his laptop. He had secretly gotten into computer programming over the last few months, and by secret, it meant he didn't share it with Austin. When he first got interested in the field, he brought it up with Austin, but Austin seemed to really not like coding or programming at all. And knowing Austin, if Gus ever brought up how much he enjoyed it, Austin would just continue to put it down and end up making Gus feel stupid again. So he decided to keep this one on the down low. He was currently working on creating a simple schedule reminder program that would periodically remind Gus to do his chores. Except rather than the usual pop-up, Gus was programming to, as he named it, to switch up the reminders and say things like, "Hey genius, stop gaming and do your laundry," and other quotes to that nature. He was so absorbed in his numbers that he hadn't noticed the girl standing right behind him until she practically made him jump out of his seat when she asked how long he had been learning to code. Gus recognized the girl because Austin had, on more than one occasion, poked a bit of fun to Gus about how she always had this short piece of hair sticking up from her bangs. That and how she would pretty much always sit by herself with her nose in her writing pad whenever they weren't doing any activities. Gus soon learned that this girl's father was a computer programmer, and he had taught her some basics, so she was somewhat familiar with the field. After a bit of chatting, the girl brought up that she noticed Gus wasn't with his friend today. After Gus explained that Austin was absent, the girl just gave an "ah, gotcha," and continued to watch Gus's laptop. The silence and having this random girl standing right behind him made Gus's awkward tolerance bar reach new heights, and so he tried to break the silence by saying the first thing that came to his head, which he only realized after he blurted it out that he just took the same thing that she said and made it sound a whole lot worse. "So, I notice that you don't have any friends." Gus immediately cringed at the incredibly sarcastic-sounding rudeness he just blurted out. But surprisingly, the girl didn't seem offended at all, actually somewhat amused. The other girls all know each other since they seem to be from the same school. They invited me to eat lunch with them on day one and then proceeded to read through my songbook without my permission and gave me their honest review on what they think of my writing. I was a bit concerned they'd end up accidentally misplacing my book if I continued to take them up on their offer to sit with them, so I don't. "Ouch. Sorry about that," Gus replied. It's whatever. They do them and I'll do me. Everyone's happy. Besides, I'm too busy trying to figure out how to write these songs to spend my time thinking about how sucky they were. Like they say, when you're busy trying to make yourself happy, you've got no room for negativity." Actually, no, they don't say that. I just came up with that. It's not bad. That could be a good song lyric. There's even somewhat of a rhyme there with happy and negative. The girl trailed off in thought as she walked away to go back to her writing, leaving Gus with his fingers hovering above his keyboard and a pop of realization. As Gus opened the doors to his high school, he felt somewhat ridiculous as he remembered just how long he let Austin drag him around. But at the same time, he couldn't blame his past self. Before he met Austin, he was so incredibly surrounded by loneliness and insecurity. Whether he knew it consciously or not, the truth of it was he was terrified of going back to that lonely place. so terrified he'd do practically anything to keep Austin around. He just wanted to be needed by someone. What he didn't realize was that he had it completely wrong the entire time. It didn't have anything to do with Austin. It didn't have anything to do with being alone. It came from his subconscious mentality, the same one that he's always had even before middle school. The mentality of looking to find happiness from others. He always felt the need to validate himself with others, as though he needed some okay from another person just to have the right to be happy. He had so strongly and unknowingly convinced himself that he couldn't be happy without it, that he made that reality for himself. And so rather than focusing on what he enjoys and wants to do, he would spend all his time thinking about how he could appeal to others so that they may validate him. But all that did was give people power over him, a power that Austin had taken advantage of. Surely if that girl with the interesting hair could be completely content in her own company, then he could too. Or at least he could work towards it. Once the summer camp was over, Gus stopped hanging out with Austin and basically cut him off. It was something that was incredibly hard. He felt so much that he at least owed Austin an explanation. But he knew that if he did, Austin would just turn things around again and make Gus feel even guiltier. So he just tried to ignore the feeling and focus on his life. For the first couple weeks, Austin kept contacting Gus with messages. At first asking to meet up and such, and then what was up with Gus ignoring his messages, and then right to his way of guilt-tripping Gus, which did work, quite well actually. Gus felt pretty horrible for just suddenly cutting off someone he'd been so close to for years, but he just had to keep reminding himself that all that guilt and negativity was only there because he let their friendship get to this point. After a few weeks, all the messages from Austin stopped, pretty suddenly too, and Gus never heard from him again. And as the silent weeks of summer went on, the guilt, which Gus had somewhat convinced himself he'd just have to live with, started lifting. And by the time fall was approaching, Gus had pretty much forgotten about Austin. It only really hit him when the first day of school started approaching. He was pretty amazed at how quickly it took to just not care about his old best friend. He wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but he didn't really have time to worry about it. After summer camp, Gus really got absorbed into his programming hobby, and as school approached, all he could think about was how he needed to get a bunch of his projects finished before he was hit with the school workload. But that was all sorted out now. Now, as Gus walked through the hallways to get to homeroom, he wondered what Austin would say, or not say. What happened to Austin after he no longer had his partner to drag around? As much as he felt he probably should, Gus didn't hate Austin, not even a little. All he wondered was, what could have happened to make a person feel the need to have power over someone else? And now that he didn't have it anymore, what could he be feeling like? In a lot of ways, Austin was just like he was, Gus thought. He felt the need to find validation in others too. He went about it in a different way, but it was really the same story. Austin just wanted to be needed by someone, so he found someone and made them feel like they needed him. And in that way, Gus couldn't hate him. Not when he knew so well that feeling that came with being not needed. Gus reached his homeroom and walked inside. He scanned the room full of his classmates, and soon enough he spotted Austin. He was hanging with a couple of other boys, laughing and teasing one of them in an incredibly familiar fashion. It was strange seeing it from a distance, but the sight of seeing Austin completely unchanged and just as he recalled him on the last day of summer camp made Gus shake his head and laugh. He should have known. Austin hardly noticed Gus, but same went for practically the whole room full of kids. It seemed Gus's inherent ability to be invisible wasn't something he'd grow out of anytime soon. But for once, he completely did not care. He didn't feel alone in seclusion, nor did he feel unworthy of being friends with anyone. And whatever ended up happening in the school year, whether he made new friends or not, he'd be just fine with it. Gus had found his own happiness, and he just hoped that Austin would eventually find his. What? What was that? You think this video is late? no idea what you're talking about. Hello, I'm Zaccura, and thank you for listening to my story of August. If you're new here, then this is part 8 in a currently ongoing series I'm doing for the year of 2018, where every month I attempt to create a character based off of that month, as well as write a story for them. So you just listen to August's story, and I will have the playlist with the rest of the stories in this series so far linked up in a card, as well as in the description box, so if you like, you can go and check them out. Now it is time to go into the other half of this video and chat a bit about August's story and illustration. But before that, just wanted to apologize for not uploading any videos for the past 2 weeks. I was not planning on doing that, but just some unexpected things came up, and combine that with me somewhat stressing over this month's story like for the whole month. But what's new that happened is a pretty familiar feeling by now. So I thought I was only going to be skipping one Sunday of uploading. That was 2 weeks ago, so that I could really just focus on getting August's story finished up. I thought I would be able to finish it last week or whatever, but it ended up extending to another week. And I also had, my mind was a bit preoccupied with some other life things, so yeah. I actually remember I just finished writing August's story on this Sunday, which was like 4 days ago at the time that I'm recording this. So yeah, my channel was on a little bit of a mini hiatus there, but that's life, stuff happens. But I'm really looking forward to getting back to my normal weekly Sunday uploads and also doing live streams again. It's been a while since my last live stream, so I'm really looking forward to drawing and chilling with you guys again. I probably will actually be streaming sometime this week, either on like Friday or Saturday, but don't hold me to that. And I think I've talked enough about that, so it's time to chat about August's story. So I'm gonna try to not make this too long, because this video is already going to be on the longer side, because the story alone is over 14 minutes long, and also because I don't want to talk really too much about it, because if I do, I'm probably just going to end up bashing myself a lot, because that's what I usually end up doing, and I know you guys are sweethearts and don't really like when I do that to myself. But let's just put it this way. A lot of things did not go my way for this month's story, and if you're an artist, like a visual artist, then that's something that you probably know, like you can probably relate to this, you deal with that on like a daily basis, where you have an idea in your head and then you try to draw it and it doesn't come out the way that you envisioned it, and it's kind of frustrating and whatever. And as an artist, I've learned so far to be pretty acceptant of that and even embracing it a lot of the time, because sometimes trying to so like stubbornly stick to that idea in your head, you're missing out on something that could have been even more beautiful and even more expressive and say even more what you're trying to say. And so I've kind of learned to just kind of go with the flow a little bit there. And I guess as a writer, I'm starting to learn to accept that as well, that things don't always go my way, but that doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that's something that I should be like really not happy about, because just even when things do go your way, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be like the best thing for the story. Sometimes letting it go and just letting it be something different might actually make it better than that original idea you had in your head. Not necessarily saying that's what happened this time, but yeah, I don't know. It's just really more, I just want to hear what you guys think, rather than me just kind of inputting some like, oh, I hated this part, or I didn't like that part, this part didn't go the way I wanted to, this is how I wanted it to go, and stuff like that. I just want to hear like, what do you guys think about this story without me inputting any of that into you. So be sure to let me know what you think in the comments section below. But as for the actual inspiration for the story, so the word or meaning for the month of August was friendship. And pretty much the moment I saw that, I immediately wanted to make a story around a sort of not good friendship, sort of toxic friendship, because I'm bad like that. No. Really, it was just that I realized that so far in this monthly character series, all the side characters, be they family, friends, or even strangers, have all been either positive impacts on the main characters or just neutral, like they didn't really do anything. But yeah, I've pretty much always had the main character's friends and family be very good and supportive people to the main character of the stories. And I think I always did that because I wanted the main focus to be on whatever internal struggle the main character was going through, and I needed to have them deal with and overcome this internal negative impact rather than an external negative impact. But since the meaning for this month was around something like friendship, which is an external thing, obviously, I figured it was only fitting to show the struggles that can be caused by an unhealthy one and how it can actually affect a person in a very internal way, sometimes without the person even realizing it themselves. The intricacies of the actual characters I portrayed did go a little different than I originally thought, but nonetheless that was the base of the story. As for the illustration, I'm alright with how it came out. I think it did come out a bit more orange than I was expecting. This was probably caused because half of the coloring process was done when the sun was out, and the other half was when the sun was down, so I was a little bamboozled by the light change situation, but hey, who wouldn't want those bright orange jeans, eh? I'd wear them. The birthstone for the month of August is Peridot. Well, actually, there's two birthstones for August, which is Peridot and Sardonyx, but I kind of needed to pick one for obvious reasons, and I felt Peridot was prettier, and also it's light green, which is one of the colors for the month, so yeah, that works better than a brown piece of Sardonyx. The flowers for the month are poppies and gladiolus. That's how you pronounce them. Gladiolus. The colors for the month are orange, red, and light green, and the zodiac signs are Leo and Virgo. And as for them names, mwahahaha. Not really sure they're too creative this time, but the main character's name is Gus, and the other character's name is Austin. So I figured, there was August in, it's got all the letters in there, okay? I considered naming Gus Augustus so that it would have like the whole August name in one person's name, but I felt it was a bit unmodern sounding. I mean, we're not in ancient Greek times. Apologies to any Augustuses out there. I think your name is awesome. Oh yeah, and that computer program Gus was making, named 2? Well, its name was the result of me taking the last 3 letters in August and spelling them backwards. I bet you didn't see that one coming. Oh yeah, I'm sure all y'alls were all like, oh, I got the whole Austin and Gus thing. Oh yeah, and you thought that was the end of the play on names in this story. Ha! Wrong. I will always find a way to trip you guys up. Well, that brings me to the end of this month's story. Thank you so much for watching, and please do let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell to stay notified for when I upload. I make new videos every week, usually, and I usually upload on Sundays. If you want to follow me on social media, all the links to that are in the description box where you can follow me for daily updates. And until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!